Hits 96.
Hits 96, Chattanooga's #1 hit music station. Gino D here with you, and once again we have a special guest joining us in our little podcast studio here. He goes by the name of Colton Pointz. How you doing, Colton?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing this and taking some time out. You are on the cutting edge right now of country music.
Well, I'm certainly trying to be. I'm trying to keep up with everything, definitely.
Is this your first time in Chattanooga?
It is.
Oh, it's a wonderful city. You have to, if you have some time, I'm not sure what your schedule is. I know you're only from living in Nashville now, so you'll be able to come back. But if you do, you got to explore it. Lots of great venues, restaurants. We have it all here. It's a little Nashville, people like to call it.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Yeah. I heard it's the weekend destination. So.
Yes. It's a very cool place, and we're happy to have you here. So you have a song out right now called Magnolia, which is you're promoting. We're going to get into that, but I thought since we're just getting to know you, let's start from the very beginning. I know you've been doing this music thing for a handful of years now, but let's start from the very beginning. How did you kind of find your voice? How did you know that you had this talent, and how did it all begin?
Yeah, well, I've been playing piano for about 10 years, and I went down to a local pub where I'm from in Florida called Ave Maria, and I'd asked the owner if I could go play there on Sundays, and it was a small Catholic town, and so after church I would go out and play on Sundays and stuff, and one day the owner saw me playing, and he's like, I need to introduce you to my son. He's back there washing dishes. Like, he's a singer.
Sure.
And so I got involved with him. Him and I, started kind of as a duo. We brought in a drummer. His name's Michael Joyce, who came up with the idea for Magnolia.
Okay.
And we started, we were playing the pub in Ave Maria for 20 people. And from there, in 3 years, we went from doing that to the White Sox national anthem and opening for Eli Young, Chris Jansen, all that stuff. So, it's just been like a roller coaster, the first 3 years.
Sure.
But, through all that time, I had never written up until the point of being in the band. I actually never even listened to country music up until that point of being in the band. And getting to know him and getting to know, being around country music, I realized there was such an opportunity, especially with the piano, which is, my main instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And, everybody comes in with the guitar, and I was like, maybe that's a way to differentiate myself a little bit, have the piano center stage.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, especially in the country music world, because if I'm not mistaken, it's not necessarily done often.
No, and that's what's, it's featured in a lot of songs, and that's what makes it really special is because, how many times, even like 90s country, especially like Tim McGraw, something like that, how many iconic piano licks there are,
right?
Or The Dance by Garth Brooks, just like there's so many great iconic things that can be done with the piano, and so my hope is to take it from sort of the side stage and bring it front and center.
I like that a lot. Do you remember the actual moment, or maybe the performance, or maybe it was just you hanging out with some people and it finally happened and it was like, wow, I can actually probably do this or try to do this professionally? Do you remember that moment?
Oh, man, that's probably the Eli Young band that was the big one.
Yeah.
Because those guys are great, and that was the biggest show that we had ever done, and it was like probably 2 years ago now that we did it, and there was like 2,000 people there. It was a sold-out show at the Ranch in Fort Myers, and we were a three-piece band at the time. We didn't even have a bass player, and so it was basically me like covering the whole sound on the piano. I sang harmony, and we got the lead singer and a drummer, and everyone just loved us. And the Eli Young band were so impressed, they invited us on the tour bus afterwards, and we're like, dude, like, let me take your number, let's connect. And even after I left the band, I still stayed in contact with them, and they were like, hey man, when are you moving to Nashville? And I really was like, wow, okay, I got a lot of people that really believe in this.
Yeah.
That was probably the main moment.
It's gonna be good. That confidence boost. That's something. I'm gonna do this. I got that.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Very cool. Your music has been described as featuring mature and fully developed stories. Kind of, you craft a narrative in your songs. Talk about your songwriting process. What influences you? How you go about it? Is it medley first? Is it lyrics first? What kind of hits you when you?
I usually end up just going for everything at the same time. I find it's easier. Usually, I found that as long as I'm in the right key, the melody will come along. If I have the right melody, the words will come along. And so it's just kind of that tier. But I very rarely have lyrics. I don't think I've ever just had lyrics then put melody to it afterwards.
Okay.
It's always kind of been at the same time, and usually I'm a huge fan of writing it all in one sitting, and I'm a firm believer that like what happens in that session is what's meant to be there, and not that you never change
Sure.
a word or anything here and there, but I never go back and like rewrite lines or anything. I always just I think I'm just a vessel for the energy in the room, and if it's meant to be there, it'll come out, and that's it.
So in that natural state, just go for it and see what happens.
Yeah, and I always try to storyboard a little bit, which helps me, write. Usually this comes in handy in the second verse, especially after I kind of get the chorus down. And once I know where the story's supposed to go, like Magnolia, like I knew that she was going to come back with the flowers. So it's like, okay, now how do I get there? So
when it comes to that is it based on personal experiences when you tell these stories, or are these stories that you're making up, or sometimes depends on the song?
Yeah, I like to create characters because I have
Okay.
a really hard time writing about myself. It's just
Alright.
really weird, and I worry that people aren't going to be able to relate to it because it's me. And so I'll take a feeling or something, and then I'll just expand it and then create the characters, you know, and especially because I'm writing country music, I don't wear boots and stuff. So sometimes I'll create a character that would wear boots, and it makes
Sure.
sense in the song to do the things that they would do versus someone like me. So.
Okay. Well, it's funny because, and I've talked to different artists about this too. They love it when people will take a song and you'll have a certain meaning or story that you're trying to tell, but somebody else will take that and have a completely different perspective on it and say, actually, I use this song to talk about whatever they're going there, whatever other struggle. And I know that's kind of, it has to be a surreal moment when somebody can hear the lyrics to even Magnolia, and you might have a certain thought behind it, but somebody else is going to come and say, no, I think this, but that's okay.
Yeah, and that's what I mean.
The beauty of it.
All the greatest songs in history, like Hotel California, for
Yes,
example,
exactly.
that's a just super famous one. But they're meant to be interpreted in their own way. You know, I have a song called "Whiskey Can't Heal Broken Hearts," and obviously it's about, you know, that it's time and not whiskey, and you know that's
Sure.
that's what's supposed to help you get over things, you know, especially tough times in your life. But it doesn't need to just be about whiskey. It can be about anything. You know,
Right.
it's a universal message. So.
Very cool. You also like to navigate blending all different genres of music, country, blues, alternative, and pop. Why do you do that? Talk about that want to blend those elements.
Well, that's where I think the uniqueness is. I mean, it's just like, even if you go to school and you're getting a degree, you know, it's all about like the interdisciplinary function of going to school. I mean, like the double majors, the future, you know, it's about combining disciplines. So I guess, especially with, like we were talking about how
Sure.
country music is evolving, it's all about, okay, I have a country idea, but how do I make the production different? What are the things that influence me? Like Hardy, for example, like his is all
Yes.
rock, you know, Morgan Wallen's is all pop, Old Dominion pop. So that's the future of country music is, you know, taking the idea but then expanding upon it and then adding the influences.
Yeah, and you're going to catch it's such a bigger net to catch the audience. You're going to be able to create those sounds that are like somebody's looking for that pop sound, but then, oh wow, if it's a country blend, then now I can go to look for those other artists. So I completely agree with that direction, and I do think it is the future of country, whether people like it or not.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
the direction it's going. But I think it's a good thing ultimately for the genre. Let's talk about performing a little bit. I know you said you've opened up for Eli Young and Chris Jansen and a few others. What do you hope audiences take away when they see you perform?
I hope that they can walk away and say, I haven't seen something like that, at very least in a long time. A lot of my piano influence comes from like Jerry Lee Lewis, you know, or
Okay.
there's a blues pianist who lived in New Orleans for a long time. His name is Professor Longhair, and my uncle, you know, used to love him. And so, I mean, my goal is to bring back some of that energy, that electricity that some of those guys had on stage, and just the idea of, like I said, having the piano in the middle.
Sure.
I stand up whenever I play keyboard as well, so I get to move around a lot more.
Okay.
But when I used to sit down when I was in the band, I mean, I used to put my foot up on the piano and the whole thing, you know, the full Jerry Lee Lewis trick, and so that's the main thing. And I hope that people find that the arrangements and the music is exciting. Since I've been in a band for so long, I've really learned, you know, what sounds good out there versus just like, you know, in the studio or whatever, and how to kind of take it up another level, how to have a really tight band. You know, so that's probably the main thing.
All right, very cool, very cool. Well, we're going to get into Magnolia. We'll probably do that in a separate video because I know you're going to perform for us. We're super excited about that. I want you to talk about the song behind the story behind the song and all of that. We'll get into it. But more or less, to wrap up this interview, what is the main goal for you? What are we working on? What can we look forward to the future? Obviously, Magnolia is out. You have a couple other songs. I know that you're doing a bunch of shows, handful of shows in Nashville, trying to perform at all times. But what is the main goal for Colton Pointz?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, having success in music is a big thing.
Yes.
One of the things that I've been really passionate about, my mom, it was the second song that I'd ever written. It was a song called God's Heartache on Sunday. And it's one that I've been kind of keeping in the vault for a rainy day sort of thing. But my mom she was bullied when she was in high school. And it's one of those things where it's like either you went through it or you know somebody who's gone through it. And hearing my mom talk about it, it just like really struck a chord with me. And so I ended up writing this song called God's Heartache on Sunday. And I come from a Catholic family, and so that was always a big influence in my life. And I wanted to start a foundation at some point called the God's Heartache on Sunday Foundation,
Sure.
and I wanted to be able to help kids who, you know, weren't as fortunate in life and didn't have all the same opportunities that I'd gotten when I was young, and who still wanted to do music or like wanted to do sports. You know, those were two things that kind of always felt like kept my life together. No matter what was going on in the outside world, I was like, I could always turn to music, I could always turn to sports. And I want kids, you know, who are really passionate about either of those things, want to do well in school. Like, I want to be able to help them achieve their dreams and at least have a shot, like I feel like that I'm getting now. You know, certainly at this point in my life, with all the people coming around me, the most important thing to them, which I'm so grateful for, is their number one goal is that I get at least a chance to do this. And I'll never take that for granted. And I want to make sure that other kids have that same opportunity.
Very cool. So taking your talents and obviously using your own goals, but also using that platform to help out a cause, which is
absolutely.
I think that's fantastic. Colton, thank you so much for dropping by today and doing this with us.
Oh gosh, thank you for having me.
We're going to do a separate video, so keep watching, but we're going to be seeing Colton perform Magnolia right here on Hits 96. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hits 96.